And like unstructured data is like 80 to 90% of what a company deals with. And with AI, it's just interesting what we can tap into. When I'm thinking about a payment integrity span, just to kind of give you an idea, if a DRG or a case rate comes in from an inpatient hospital, let's say it's at 789, for example, and let's say that's a high rated sepsis procedure, and there's a lot of money now for this procedure, and it's very complex. Well, some of the tools that we have now, and there's some that you can buy on the market. Again, they're still learning and getting through it, but they can go through the record and say, well, wait a minute, you built sepsis, but I don't see sepsis anywhere in here, or I don't see the criticality that you've built in anywhere in this documentation. Now they have it where the AI can pinpoint it and say, hey, look, this has a 95% chance of an issue, or this has a 70% chance. We're not sure yet, but it allows an auditor to go through and scan that document much faster. Instead of, to your point, reading undecipherable script, they can pinpoint where certain keywords are found, and they can really go through their audit much faster. So instead of taking 1 to 2 hours to review an itemized bill, they may be able to do it in 30 minutes just because they're able to target these things. So there's certainly some good developments there. But like you said, I mean, it's just so much junk and garbage. One of the things that Cheryl and I have been in some earlier podcasts that we've talked about too is that AI governance is as much data governance that,
Mm.
a lot of folks are running towards these solutions, and that's fine. There's certainly some things in small that you can do, but you want to think big picture. And if your data is just a mess and siloed and not cleaned, you're going to have a real challenge kind of getting into really into liftoff here. And it's just I know it's a struggle companies are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, and you brought up the one of the great, aspects of AI, which is the ability to take these scaled repetitive tasks and just run through them, right? But you're right, if you don't
Yeah.
have good data on the front end, you can't apply something like AI or ML in general to these areas. And I honestly think that's where healthcare's issue is going to be. It's not even the risk averse piece of like we're healthcare and we've got to be very, very careful, which they do. I think they're going to go into their data and have their data teams come back and say, we're just not ready for this. And it's going to require additional investment on that side before they do AI.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on
I
that
heard of it.
note, I just want to piggyback on that note. So we know that data governance is really one of those fundamental things, right, today that we in most organizations should be taking care of, like, addressing. But let's just say an executive leader, like, what are in this space, they're not necessarily in the weeds all the time. But what are just some top three things that I think they should be really thinking about when they come across, because AI is going to knock on everybody's door, whether they like it or not, including the healthcare space, right? But I think I just want to help maybe equip some of our leaders to start to think, have cognitive decision making, and give them some thoughts of what to start with, right? Let's start with three. What are some three things you think that maybe they should think about?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the highest level one, Cheryl, first, because I think because you're saying at the highest level. If I
Yeah,
talk to a board or I talk to a
yeah.
C-suite, right? Say
Mm-hmm.
the first thing you should be thinking about is almost nothing we've discussed so far. That will become number two and three, responsible AI and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But the first thing you need to think about is how is AI going to change consumer behavior or client behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the same question I would have put out with the dawn of the digital age as we went through it, at the dawn of the mobile age. First priority isn't like, how do we do AI? It's to understand how AI is going to affect the consumer, right? And then based on the consumer's change in behavior, how are we positioned to take advantage of that, right? So if you're a retail company at the dawn of the digital age and you weren't thinking about how consumer behavior might change, you would never have really thought about an Amazon or someone coming up and eating your lunch. You would have thought about, how do I bring the internet into my brick and mortar store, right?
Yeah,
Which wasn't the way to
yeah,
go.
yeah.
So the way I put it here is that, I was head of strategy for WebMD for a number of years, and WebMD was at that point, right? That's where WebMD came. People suddenly go, hey, I don't have to rely only on my healthcare professionals. I can go online and find this information. And it drastically changed how they interacted with the healthcare environment. I think the same is going to be here, right? If you're a healthcare organization, I'll just use that example.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't going to Google search nearly as much as they did before. They're going to have autonomous agents, AI autonomous agents. They're going to have healthcare assistants. What does the healthcare assistant replace, just like minute clinics replace certain kind of healthcare cadences. Does a digital assistant replace most of what you go to your PCP for, right? Because your PCP is really giving you a baseline diagnostic that then sends you to a specialist.
Yeah.
A healthcare assistant that's AI based and smart enough, able to do that, combined with maybe telemedicine. So my point on AI is if you're at that CEO level, you really need to think about where is consumer behavior tilting towards based on the friction that's in healthcare today and what AI allows as lubricant for that friction. And I think you're going to see, my point on healthcare is I think you're going to see massive amounts of people taking control of their healthcare decisions through AI, the same way they did with digital. And digital had a limitation on kind of intelligence that AI doesn't have. And so I think you're going to see people absolutely self-diagnosing and driving their healthcare decisions through AI. And yeah, I mean, healthcare will fight it. They'll go, that's not right. Trust me, they did this with WebMD and made it WebMD. But the truth is,
That's interesting.
you see your doctor once every 2 months. You're in front of your computer or your digital assistant every day, and you're going to ask it all the questions and get to a conclusion. And doctors are going to have to learn to deal with that being a part of the patient's process. So,
That's
Hmm.
uh, on the other two or three, I'd say, hey, number 2 and 3, I would come back to the governance piece, right? You should be moving fast, but you should have a risk management framework for your organization. As they move forward, you should have someone designated or a committee designated who owns that and has real empowerment for it, and be driving that forward. And I'd say past the person within that risk management framework, you should have policies against that as the company moves forward. Um, I would say very clearly, most policies today are memorandums that we call thou shalt not memorandums. Don't do X, AI, but they don't really give guidance around how you should use AI. And so we think that's as important as well. And then my third one would just be probably AI ROI. Just because you can in AI doesn't mean you should right now.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, a lot of companies should be looking at the ROI of what they do before they move in AI and understand is there a real payoff. And most ROI is going to be easy to spot, especially on the part we discussed earlier about efficiencies.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's going to be clear operational efficiencies that are there for the taking, and they should be jumping into fast as soon as they understand what the return is. Okay.
Well, along with that, when you look at healthcare payers, and obviously Cheryl and I, and it sounds like you have familiar with that as well. You have an IT department, you've got your compliance department, you got claims, you got payment integrity, all these different groups. Should you have an AI department, or should AI provide more kind of a fluid organization across, because there's so many people that are going to be maybe using it differently? I mean, when a leader's coming in and saying, "Oh my God, how should I get this organized?" Should it be organized in IT? Should it be organized in compliance, or should a leader handle it a different way?
Yeah, typically what I'd say early on right now is there should be some center of excellence on that. So there should be a centralized group for it who has expertise just because this is coming so fast and it's got specific expertise around it that you'd want that, right? And this is very much like the early days of social media, where social was its own thing and then became part of marketing, right? It was everything you
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Or cloud. Cloud was a special group, and then it became cloud was everything you did.
Mm.
Eventually, it's going to be everything, right? But early on, you had specialized groups because the expertise was so unique, and you needed to have that expertise radiating out quickly, so you had it in one group. So I'd recommend you do have that in one group today, but with an idea that that's a temporary solution as this becomes more pervasive in your org. All right.
That makes sense. It's more like from the community, from the central center of excellence down towards to a community level of
Yeah.
excellence, right?
Yeah.
So you start from the top and then you disseminate it down. I heard one thing that was interesting from what you were mentioning on what leaders need to start to think about on, obviously under assessing their organization strategy, right? If it makes sense for their company and with their user and client behavior. But then the other part that I heard was make sure you have a way to have accountability and
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah.
Accountability and enforcement.
Yeah.
Only because we I've seen this, and we all have seen this. We have organizational policies, but no enforcement. So really, it's just
Yeah.
information.
Yeah, and that is the hard part right now. We've talked to a lot of CISOs, general counsels, etc. And I'm gonna be honest, for most of the people we talk to, they're turtling right now, right? They don't want to be the bad guy, right? They don't want to be the one who kind of,
Okay.
okay, slow down, because the
Uh-huh.
CEO, everyone's going, getting out in front of everyone, going, we're going to go as fast as we can, right?
Yeah.
And they're looking around and they're seeing all these red flags, right, everywhere. And they're like, man, I really don't want to put the brakes on, but this isn't good right now. And so I think the empowerment part is an important one, because that person, if they're just tapped on the shoulder and told they have risk management but no empowerment, that's what they're doing right now. And that's why they'll send out a
True.
memorandum. But even when they send out the memorandum, which says, hey, example, don't use proprietary information in ChatGPT, right? Basic one, Samsung had this issue. A bunch of companies had this issue early on. Truth is, though, if you ask them as a follow-up, well, all right, you put that memorandum out, how are you enforcing it? They're not. They're like, well, we know employees are using ChatGPT on their own. We have no oversight of it. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, as long as I don't know, I don't care. Right. And so that's the problem you have right now at most companies is everyone's, playing around in ChatGPT. God knows which employees are putting proprietary files into it still at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big risk, huge
Yes,
risk.
I
Yeah.
agree. This is almost like a phishing attack that says, don't click that link. You
Okay. Yeah.
click it anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's really hard to do. But on that note, and Tom, I'll give you the next question if you have. But on that note, what is a good way to enforce it? What would be, an idea of how to, because we do this all day long, right? We have corporations send out information and it's in my inbox, like 200 of them, and I click it. I don't necessarily have to read it.
Yeah.
It's just I check the box. But how can it be really changing for the employee so that it enforces something, in the organization?
Yeah, and this is why we think centralization of what you're doing is so important, right? So when we talk about those fundamentals, the only way you can start to enforce it is by having it mapped out in a single place, right?
Mm,
Because otherwise, it's everyone's pet project. It's been circulated in an email or something like that, but no one's really kept track of it. That's why we highly recommend that you take a project management approach to this and you do a mapping exercise. Hey, we need to, by the end of this month, we're going to know every project that's AI related um, in a centralized system. We are going to, at the end of this month, have a standardized approval process that runs through a management chain up to that centralized group of excellence on AI. We are going to have a policy that everyone has attested to who's working on any of these projects, just like you would attest to other policies that are important in other areas. And so that's why we think the centralized approach is important right now, because otherwise you just have a litany of pet projects going on and people going, well, I just didn't know. So I did X as their cover. And so half of that, or maybe even more than half, is really good stuff, right? It's people with a passion,
mhm.
driving forward, and you don't want to get in the way of their passion, but you want to at least have some guardrails just to be like, hey, just be aware, these are the things that you can't do. Or if you're contemplating them, you have to go up through this chain for approval on it, right, as an exception. And so those are the things that I think are a reasonable balance at the stage versus just going, what we don't know won't hurt us, because in a few years it will.
It would.
Hmm.
And on the funny thing on that last point is you're already seeing that now in healthcare. So this was the lawsuit I think Athena got into. Um, there was a lawsuit that just came out a couple weeks ago. And what's happening is they're not even using AI, right? What they've got is older ML systems that would be used for denial of care, which is
Mm,
extremely obviously touchy subject.
yeah.
And they were using these ML systems to do that. They've been using it for years. But with the scrutiny of AI comes scrutiny of ML, which are
Mhm.
very close related first cousins. And so what you're seeing is now legislators and regulatory agencies going back over ML and applying these same standards to them that we'd expect on bias and transparency. And that's where that lawsuit germinated from. And so I think this isn't a future topic. This is you're going to be looked at any way you've used data science through your organization. And that's starting now. And so And retroactively, they're absolutely going to go after you retroactively on things you're doing today, even if there's not a law against it. All right.
Hmm.
Wow. You know, it looking at it, so that is really intriguing. If we were looking at it from centralization from the employee perspective, if we flip that, and exactly to your point, this just leads well to my next question. When we consider it from the patient aspect, what does the what do organizations need to tell patients about what's happening? I mean, do they need to have an AI? You said at one point, this is driven by AI or something like that. If my claim was denied or my authorization was denied, of course, organizations can't. Here's my algorithm. Go ahead and read through it. It's some Python
Yeah.
code that we're hoping some Medicare person can go through. They can barely work their iPhone. But I mean, what should organizations be prepared to share when it comes to these are the decisions and this is how AI is impacting you? I mean, from a patient perspective, what do we need to communicate? What's fair?
Yeah, I think fairness is always disclosure, right? Going forward and saying
Mm.
this is what we've done. Here's the steps that have been taken. Obviously, that's not always the case in healthcare. And I'd say with healthcare, there's a legal piece to this too. That's usually working against disclosure, right? Healthcare companies are afraid to disclose certain things without clear edicts dictated to them. And so I think a lot of healthcare organizations are going to wait for those edicts to tell them exactly what they're supposed to say when they're supposed to say it, because they don't want to be the one out on the ledge ahead of something.
That makes sense. Okay,
That's
Um,
true.
that
It's
makes a
like
so
lot of
No
sense.
Surprise Act, because just going back to like that No Surprise Act, for example, it was, I don't know, it was published like X day, and 2 years later they haven't implemented, the organization haven't.
yeah,
They didn't do any movement until 2 years later, just
yeah,
because nobody wants to be first. They're like, you know, let's
yeah.
just kind of wait to see who goes first.
You don't want to be the precedent, right? You
Right,
want to step
right,
back.
Yeah.
right. It's like who goes with in front of the bull first. I
Yeah,
want to I want to wait and see what it does.
yeah.
But
It's
sometimes it's kind of too late after that.
Yeah, and honestly, when it comes to healthcare, I'd say as a former executive in these areas, I would probably say to most folks, be cautious. Probably wait in a lot of these. And again, the EU AI Act is great because it's a risk-based approach. So I would wait in a lot of what's called high risk categories, right? Denial of care is an extremely high risk category.
Right.
You probably shouldn't be experimenting or doing anything in AI there. But maybe in customer, first level customer support, it's an area you
Rescue.
can play in. That's very low, risk. Or at least in the background of that, helping your call center employees come up with better answers, right? You're not even putting it on the front line with customers now, but that's areas where you can still get process improvements. That's where I'd be advising at the stage, not the high risk areas at all.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Cheryl, how much time we got? Just doing a time check.
We've got some time, maybe like
Perfect.
15.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. So let's talk about some more positive stuff because I think we're talking about all this stuff that's shaky and all this regulation. Again, not to say regulation is a positive, of course, it's positive, but
Hey,
when you're
governance
thinking
is
about
sexy is my is,
hey,
is what
governance
I
is
think.
sexy. We keep saying that governance is sexy for
Eventually
sure.
people will believe it, okay?
Yeah,
Fair
exactly.
enough.
We'll lead them to water. We'll lead them to water. AI governance is sexy for sure. When you're thinking about the developments, obviously you've been involved in this from different aspects and seeing how just information technology has just evolved and where we're at now. What are you most excited about in AI and healthcare? I mean, what's something that you're really jazzed about where we could go? And not to say we'll go there, but what are you most excited about?
Potential.
Yeah, it's the potential I talked about up front, the ability as a patient to take more control of your healthcare decisions. I mean, there's our healthcare system is broken in every way, and everyone knows that. And there's not an easy solution that's coming tomorrow. And so you're going to find a lot of people who want to take control more than even the internet age has allowed them to do. And they're going to embrace digital assistants in healthcare who act like a PA or a physician or nurse who can do almost anything from an information perspective. And I think you'll start to see AI on its own do that. I think you'll see AI start to combine with health monitoring devices like your Apple Watch. So you've got these devices that are now getting more information about you on a real-time basis, feeding that into an AI system that is easy for you to control and get outputs out of, and better inform you of things on a preventative basis before you have to show up at a hospital. And honestly, I think people are going to use it as a very useful second and third opinion. I think a doctor is extremely important. Any of your physicians are extremely important people, but they're a singular opinion, and they don't know you as well as you. And so the ability to have an assistant like that who can be credible and help you get to where you want is extremely exciting. And to have that in the comfort of your home where you have continuous access to it is amazing as well. So for me, I think those are the things I'm really, really excited about in this space's potential. I think the idea of, again, more home devices that help you monitor your health and see things early, combined with this intelligence technology, is going to be incredible.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick because I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second, just to
Yeah.
just to kind of stir it up a little bit.
Fire
So
away.
when I'm thinking about the wearables, and especially how they tie into AI, I go back to, I don't know why I always do this, but Apollo 13. My conversation always ends up on that movie for some reason. I don't know why, and why no one has taken Apollo 13 and broken that down as the best management case study and movie. I mean, it's just got to be. It's just great. When I'm thinking about Jim Lovell, he's and it's just Tom Hanks' character. He's sitting in the capsule, and the physician is saying, "Hey, they got to get some sleep. Their heart rate's up and their temperature." And he pulls the wearable off, just does this. I'm so sick of the Western world knowing my temperature, and everybody else kind of does this little medical revolution. So you're right that I think some patients are certainly going to embrace it. But do you see? I'm not saying Luddites, but do you see another avenue of patients saying, "Look, I don't want that much monitoring of my personal space and my personal business"? Do you see it? Do you see it? Maybe another off shift of people that are going to be, I don't know, they may put a stop to wanting that to happen for them.
I think you'll see some of that. I think more you'll see the people take the technology and adjust it to what they want. So if they don't like the Western medicine approach, fine, homeopathy is the approach they're going to take through it. And it still has the same intelligence, right? Again, this is the same thing I went through with social media when I was in that. And it was a young person's game for a long time, and old people didn't do it. And now, you go on Facebook and your grandparents are there.
Oh man.
Right.
Yes.
Because and even for older individuals, you have to understand what's the need state anything's solving for. And in that case, it's connection, right? It helps them connect to the rest of their family in a way that's important. They're not using it nearly as robustly as younger people do for social media. I think you'll see the same thing here. You might not use it in certain areas comprehensively in everything you do, monitor your sleep schedules, all this other stuff. But managing your pills and your prescriptions and the intake of
Doctor's
those.
appointments,
Yeah,
reminders, and things like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
all the little things that can get confusing as you get older, especially to manage when you've got 5, 6 conditions going on at once. I think you'll start to see them coming together. And I sincerely hope that telemedicine blends seamlessly more into that. So you feel like you've got more control of the contact points, whether it's technology or people, between the two.
Yeah, I could definitely see like caseworkers having a lot more at their fingertips. If you have somebody who has, really intensive diabetes or older, to your point, they have a lot of different conditions and they have to get them to doctor's appointments. Maybe this wearable, they can call them a lift. They can get them to a doctor's appointment. They can make sure things are scheduled. So I definitely see a lot of benefits to it. Do you see the one thing I think is interesting? I've had this conversation with folks before. It's kind of similar where if you have people today who go to a gym and they eat right, their blood pressure is always, good, or it's always low, and they're demonstrating their cholesterol is good. I know that my companies I've worked with in the past have incentivized me to ensure that I stay healthy. I get like a $500 added to my HSA, for example, like that. That hey, you're doing really well on your cholesterol. Here's 250, for your HSA, that type of thing. Versus those who don't do that, don't go get the blood work. Well, they don't get the benefit of that, and that's whatever. Do you see a situation, or what is a slippery slope where Tom is very skeptical. Oh, I'm not wearing a wearable device, but Cheryl's like very embracing it. So my premium is way up here and my deductible is way up here, but Cheryl's premium and deductible is way down here because she's embraced the technology. Do you see a potential for a disparity that companies could start to isolate those not embracing AI in such a way?
I think Tommy just gave him the idea. I'm just kidding. Thanks.
Yeah. I think
I'm
you're
just kidding.
going to have practical problems with that. I'm just saying on that. No,
Sure,
this is your idea.
sure.
You guys own the IP on it. Okay, great.
Right.
Perfect. We got it.
Seriously.
We got it down. All right.
Let's
As
put it
I'm
down
led away in an
now.
orange jumpsuit, you guys can remind me.
And
Um,
that teeters in the bias, I think, if I'm
yeah,
just
yeah,
saying.
that
I
was
mean,
my
it could
first
happen,
one.
right? It could happen. You could see it.
So,
You could see it happening.
so my first one was bias. You
Yeah.
introduce, my issue is it's all performance based, but once you start to run it against populations, you'll probably see bias
Yep.
components to it, which will then
Yeah.
shut the program down from day one. Two, I'd say the problem with it too is, and we used to run these at WebMD for companies. It was called our private side. There's not much uptake to them. You think they'd be, even if there was incentives, there'd be a lot of participation. Always a slog to get people to do it on it.
Hmm.
So I think you've got a couple of issues like that. And then honestly, the third issue is just like the idea that healthcare companies are going to be that sophisticated in their offerings.
Good point. That's true. That's true.
So,
I'll give you that.
We do live
so,
here, you know.
yeah, I know. So the idea that they can introduce dynamic pricing based on what you do is
Right.
kind of crazy.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
ChatGPT's writing essays. We'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes.
So,
It's
so I
scary.
think I think you'll have problems with that. But I know on the other side, you are going to see, let's put it this way, you're going to see rapid advancements in biomedicine with AI, which should lead to breakthroughs in medications and other things. And the idea that you're going to see more things like Ozempic that really have the power to
Hmm.
wholesale change people's comorbidities
Yeah.
could be more prevalent as you move forward as just a general populace health take. So I might see it more from that side, the R&D side accelerating. That leads to more discoveries than the other end.
That's good. So I just time check, and we're wrapping up here. As we wrap up, you know, I want to kind of give our audience some takeaways from our conversation. What would be a one takeaway from today's conversation that you want to leave our audience with, as we talk about AI governance, ethics, implementing it responsibly, especially in the healthcare space, and leadership thinking about what they need to start to think about. Just kind of let's kind of sum it up.
Yeah. No, real quick. For me, first, I always want to tell folks, please run fast. You should be doing things in AI. Certain areas like healthcare are a little touchier, finance, insurance, et cetera, that are high risk. But in general, at least on operational efficiencies, please go fast, right? There's a lot of fat to cut in what you do, and you know it. So use AI responsibly as you do so. And when I say responsibly, I want you to understand NIST. I want you to understand these kind of responsible AI frameworks. But right now, all I ask most C-suites is just do the basics, do the fundamentals, right? Map out in a centralized place, right? Map out your projects, have approval processes, have a policy that governs it. Do basic risk management so you have an idea of what risk exists and how to mitigate it. Just do those 4 or 5 things, and you're okay. You're not the star pupil, but you're not the guy in the back who's about to get slapped on the wrist for sleeping, right? And so you just don't want to be the target when the lawsuits start to go. And I will
Hmm.
tell every C-suite I talk to, we are in the honeymoon stage of AI right now.
Mm.
This is very much like 2010, 2011 in social, when social was the savior of democracy. There was the Arab Spring. The only thing democracy needed was social to make it blossom around the world. And that's where we're at with AI. But there is going to be this year a black swan event or two that changes public opinions drastically and turn
Wow.
populaces more negative on AI because too many people are running too fast with too many knives in their hands for it not to happen. And so what I'm trying to tell people right now is just please be ahead of that. Please do the fundamentals. You can't opt out of this game because the leaders in your space are going to be using AI, but you have to be at least somewhat responsible as you move forward and say, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time.
Yeah, I'll say have a clean hands.
Yeah, exactly. Clean hands is a good way. See, you're more succinct than me. That's perfect. I need to get that down.
This is why I'm a
Clean
vision
hands, clean
implementer.
conscience. Clean hands, clean
Yes,
conscience, like
yes.
we said. And again, going back, one of the things that we're seeing, it's not GIGO, it's BIBO. It's bias in, bias out. That's the new phrase that we've got to
I'm
to
going
stick
to
to.
coin
So
that.
no. Yeah, we need to, because I mean, again, that's what we have to really worry about. I mean, everybody knows that your data is garbage. That's fine, but bias is really going to hurt you if
Yeah.
you're not if you're not keeping an eye on it.
Well,
Mhm.
thank you, Chris. This is a very enlightening conversation. I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
have, we enjoy having you here, and thank you very much for your time. And I hope everybody listen in, because we're gonna deep dive some more things later on, but stay tuned to with our new episodes and social. So thanks, everybody.